I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on a special broadcast of KPBS Evening Edition after Big Blue Live. Grounding drones, the first no-drone zone in the nation, may be found in San Diego County, and the new measure aimed at buzzing them away from homes.
September is Father Joe's annual Be a Good Neighbor Month. I'm Peggy Pico with what you can do to help the homeless on both sides of the border. And the health benefits of fish, why Americans aren't eating enough, and is fish a sustainable food source?
I try not to name things I intend to eat.
Building the nation's largest fish farm off the San Diego coast, the benefits and concerns for this new operation. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. KPBS has learned that an investigation is underway into allegations of mismanagement against the head of the YMCA of San Diego County. Our investigative reporter, Mitha Sharma, says the findings will be delivered in a report to the YMCA's board.
Accusations have been circulating for months that YMCA President and Chief Executive Officer Baron Hurtelin Doherty had inflated membership and revenue figures. Three sources who spoke on the condition of anonymity say the YMCA's corporate board has ordered an independent inquiry to review those allegations as well as complaints about staff treatment. The decision to probe Hurtelin Doherty's management of the 15-branch YMCA came several months after two Encinitas YMCA board members sent a letter to the organization's leadership outlining concerns. Chief among them was eliminating a youth program that gave discounted memberships to children under 13. Later, the two board members complained they were asked to resign. A spokeswoman for Hurtelin Doherty acknowledged concerns have been raised about management of the Y and that a, quote, third-party auditor has been hired. She declined further comment. Corporate board members did not respond to requests for interviews. I'm Mitha Sharma, KPBS News.
A national debate on police confrontations has led to a new California website offering a look at officer interactions with citizens. State Attorney General Kamala Harris introduced the Open Justice site today. Its database is the result of months of work to improve transparency and government accountability. UC Berkeley professors published a brief analysis. They found police agencies have reported 345 officer deaths between 1980 and 2014. They also found the arrest rate peaked in 1989. Harris invited more journalists and academics to review the data. Following up now on a drone ban proposal in Poway, city council members there approved an ordinance to keep them grounded during emergency situations. This summer, drones got in the way of several firefighting efforts in California. Poway is the first city in the nation to pass a drone ban. San Diego UT says the 45-day ban in Poway is a stopgap measure until a more detailed law can be crafted. Protecting privacy of Californians on the ground from drones in the air. A new bill heading to Governor Brown's desk right now would require drones to fly at least 350 feet in the air over private property. The drone pilot would need property owner permission to fly lower.
That'll create a no-fly zone, if you will, prohibiting drones from flying within 350 feet over your house. It will be just like any other trespass. Drones, if someone can't jump the fence into your backyard without your permission, neither should they be able to fly a drone over your house without your permission.
Drone advocates and tech companies say the bill would stifle innovation and the creation of jobs. An update on a sexual misconduct investigation at San Diego State. The school lifted a male student's suspension after they found allegations of sexual misconduct were unsubstantiated. The Union Tribune says Francisco Sosa plans to sue the school for monetary damages. He also wants officials there to apologize for sending a campus-wide email that told students he had been arrested in December. The charges were later dropped and Sosa enrolled in another school. So far, no comment from San Diego State. Restricting concealed weapons at schools and colleges, Assembly members passed a bill that would let school officials control firearms on campus. It also closes a loophole on a law allowing concealed firearms on any campus, including elementary schools. If passed, police chiefs or school districts would maintain the right to adopt their own policies. The San Ysidro School District provided its first signs of being on sound financial footing after nearly 3 years on the verge of bankruptcy. Leo Castaneda from our media partner iNewsSource joins us now with an update on the South Bay District's finances. First, Leo, remind us how the district got into financial trouble.
Well, the district's trouble started with a former board member and a superintendent getting caught up in corruption charges. Since then, it's also dealt with a revolving door of interim superintendents and a contentious teacher strike. It got into some financial trouble when it started spending more than it was getting from state revenues and local taxes. The district even projected that it would run out of cash multiple times. So as you can imagine, running out of cash is the end of the line for a school district.
But there's finally some light at the end of the tunnel here, right?
That's right. The district has a brand new board, and in March they put out a report showing that it was in much better financial footing than before. But questions remain about how San Ysidro got out of its crisis and how bad things really were. For example, in 2014, the district ended the year with a surplus, despite having projected a multi-million-dollar shortfall.
Does anyone, Leo, know why the projections turned out to be wrong?
Not quite. A financial advisor appointed by the county said that the district was able to do some internal borrowing, and it got lucky with some breaks from the state that kept it afloat. The former chief financial officer at San Ysidro said that there's no one reason, but rather thousands of small changes and savings. Whatever the right reason is, it could have big implications for the district's long-term financial health.
Leo Castaneda from our media partner, iNewsSource. And for more on this story, go to iNewsSource.org. Class will soon be in session for downtown San Diego's first charter elementary school. More than 400 students from kindergarten to 8th grade start school at the Urban Discovery Academy's new 37,000 square foot building. Teachers say putting a K-8 school in the middle of downtown shows the kind of community the East Village is trying to become.
It puts East Village on a map that says, you know, we are building a community, and we are building a community that involves all types of people.
The new building is more than just a school. There are night classes for adults planned, even weddings on the rooftop deck. Exploring the growing homeless problem on the border, Peggy Pico looks at the new Good Neighbor campaign and the things you can do to help out.
Part of this year's Good Neighbor Month explores the link between homelessness, addiction, in our border region and provokes awareness and understanding. Here with more on the issue and how you can get involved are my guests, Ev Mead, Director of Transborder Institute at the University of San Diego, and Ruth Bruland, Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul Village. And Ev, Good Neighbor Month kicks off this Thursday night with a panel discussion about homelessness and addiction in our border region. How are those three issues linked?
Well, first of all, both countries, U.S. and Mexico, have really large homeless populations. In the United States, we have probably the biggest homeless population we've had since the Great Depression. And in Mexico, homelessness has gone up dramatically, particularly over the last 10 years. Both countries also are experiencing increased drug addiction. In the United States, we're probably most familiar with the black tar heroin epidemic. It's made drug overdoses a higher cause of death than even traffic accidents in the U.S. for the first time in a generation. And then in Mexico, we've got all of a sudden a domestic market for drugs that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, and a whole bunch of problems with addiction, including homelessness.
I see. Now, can you give us an idea of how many homeless people are here in San Diego and also in Tijuana?
I'll leave the San Diego question to Ruth, who's the provider here, so I don't get it wrong. But it's kind of complicated to quantify precisely, in part because we're talking about the whole region, but in part also because in Mexico, in a place where about 40% of the economy is in the informal sector, a lot of people who would count as homeless here wouldn't necessarily count there. What we do know is that relative to a couple of years ago, there are a lot more homeless in both places.
And Ruth, as far as the count here, can you give us a general idea of how many people are homeless?
A point-in-time count was 8,700 people, about 4,000 of those still out on the street. But the number every year who become homeless is greater than that.
Now, Ruth, homeless people who are living in this country illegally, they're not entitled to any sort of government assistance. So how does St. Vincent de Paul help those people?
When we have somebody come who's undocumented, we will have an in-depth conversation with them to try and figure out if there's any avenue where their undocumented status could change. If there is not, then it's about vulnerability. Those who are most vulnerable, we're going to try and help them with the bed, but there's not a lot that can be done. So it really does boil down to that vulnerability. There are so many people on the streets.
And that's here in San Diego County. What about in Mexico? Is there any room for outreach there?
We don't do any outreach. Ev has talked about some fabulous programs that are in the Tijuana area, but St. Vincent's doesn't do any work in Tijuana.
Well, Ev, speaking of Mexico, what is the U.S. immigration policy? What kind of impact is that having on homelessness along the Mexico border?
It's had a dramatic impact. In fact, U.S. immigration policy is one of the biggest drivers of homelessness along the border area. About 80% of people who are deported from the United States are deported somewhere along the border, and about half of them are deported either to Tijuana or Mexicali, and it doesn't really matter where they're from in Mexico. So a lot of those people end up essentially stuck there, and they end up among the homeless population.
Is there a key way that Mexico is addressing the issue, or are they just kind of trying out these other programs?
You know, at the federal level, there hasn't been much of a response, but Tijuana had a very aggressive response last spring, one that on the face of it looked very progressive, but in practice it seems to have been pretty problematic. Basically what they did is they moved everybody out of El Bordo, the drainage canal, and about half of those people they put into drug rehabilitation programs. But if you look at those programs, most of them don't have, for example, for heroin addicts, they don't have methadone. They don't have psychiatrists and psychologists. And these are facilities that are locked down.
So it ended up being some unintended consequences there that I'm sure we can talk about later. Now, Ruth, I do want to get to this, though. How can people get involved? It's Good Neighbor Month, and maybe you're not going to go to Mexico and help the homeless, but what can you do?
Yeah. We have thousands of volunteers. For our work could not be done without volunteers. So Good Neighbor Month certainly has a lot to do with the work with the homeless population, but it's also about people recognizing that being a good neighbor to each other, considering us all to be neighbors, can make positive inroads in all sorts of issues and areas. And so there are various activities throughout the month that are on our website, and your website will point to that people can get involved with. Going to our thrift stores certainly raises money for our programs, but that's not the only reason we do that. We know that economically there are people that won't get nice things unless it's at a thrift store.
It's there.
And so that's part of our mission as well.
Sure, and I know there's a cleanup day in East Village and other things. And also, though, I do want to get to the panel discussion. So let me end it here with you, Ev Mead and Ruth Berlin. Thank you so much. And I want to let folks know about this panel discussion. The Being Good Neighbors panel discussion is this Thursday night at 6 p.m. at the Joan Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice at the University of San Diego. The event is free and open to all. We've got more information on Good Neighbors Month and this panel discussion at kpbs.org.
Defining policy, President Obama secured enough votes today to ensure the Iran nuclear deal survives a challenge in the Senate. 34 Democrats are enough to uphold a presidential veto if Republicans push through a resolution of disapproval. Last week, demonstrations organized by MoveOn.org called on lawmakers in San Diego and around the nation to support the plan. The president announced the deal in July. It curbs Iran's nuclear program in exchange for hundreds of billions of dollars in relief from international sanctions. Leaders from Israel are blasting the plan, saying it keeps Iran too close to developing nuclear weapons, and it supports a government that has funded anti-U.S. and anti-Israel militants. You may already be using a smartphone to track your steps, calories, and sleep. A team of San Diego engineers hopes one day you'll also track your saliva. KPBS tech reporter David Wagner explains.
A team of UC San Diego engineers have created a kind of smart mouth guard. So it's really just a normal athletic mouth guard, but the researchers have outfitted it with sensors and wireless transmitters. Their goal here is to monitor the body's chemical signals through saliva, then send that data to a smartphone in real time. In a new study, their prototype was able to track a patient's levels of uric acid, which is related to diseases like hyperuricemia and diabetes. Patrick Mercier co-led the study. He says monitoring things like lactate could help athletes better track how their bodies are responding to exercise.
When you start producing too much lactate in your saliva, that means that you're kind of reaching a critical point in your workout, and maybe there's no actual benefit to continuing your workout after.
The team's smart mouthguard isn't quite ready for the real world yet. Engineers still need to seal in all the electronics and improve the sensors before it can be worn. But researchers hope one day it could help people better keep tabs on what's going on inside their bodies without having to do things like draw blood. David Wagner, KPBS News.
It's making a splash. Big Blue Live celebrated marine life and an environmental rebirth at Monterey Bay. A live look now at the jellyfish camera at the aquarium. Closer to home, the largest fish farm in America will be built 4 miles off San Diego's coast. A nonprofit partially funded by SeaWorld is planning to correct what it calls this country's seafood imbalance. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser takes us below the ocean surface to see what's cooking.
Don Kent is peering into a water tank about the size of a backyard swimming pool. He's waiting for his fish.
There's some big guys in there. Here they come.
A school of 10 yellowtail swim by, each about 4 feet long.
That's a big fish right there.
Kent heads the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute. He's leading us through the lab where his scientists are breeding fish. I ask if he has names for them.
I try not to name things I intend to eat. So
Kent won't be eating these fish, but he hopes we'll all be chowing down on their offspring in a few years. Hub SeaWorld is partnering with a private investment firm to create the Rose Canyon Fisheries Aquaculture Project. There are already fish farms in the United States, but this one will be near San Diego's popular beaches and will be the largest yet. At its largest, the proposed farm would be 48 cages divided into 2 grids. The grids will cover about 1/5 of a square mile, the same size as the parking lot around Qualcomm Stadium. Anchor lines will run from the cages to the bottom of the ocean. Those lines extend out, so the whole project will cover about 1.3 square miles, the same size as Balboa Park without the Naval Center. The cages could have poles that extend 16 feet above the water, but Kent says we won't see them from the shore. He has computer modeling that shows the cages won't look like this, but like this, because they'll be below the horizon. To test that out, I did some trigonometry. My calculations showed if you're lying on the ground at the ocean's edge, you'd see the top third of a 16-foot pole. If you're standing up, you can see more. Environmental group San Diego Coastkeeper is concerned about the scale of the project, not just how it will look, but how it will impact the marine environment. More on that tomorrow. They took out their boat to where the project would go and held up a pole. I went to Sunset Cliffs and looked for it.
They're just a really small dot out there. So if you were walking by, I'm not sure that you would necessarily notice.
Whether it's visible or not, Kent is betting the U.S. needs his project. That's because 91% of its seafood is imported, and countries like China that produce a lot of fish are now keeping more for themselves.
So the price of seafood is going up higher and higher for people like us that have to import it. So the big advantage we have over those other supplies is from the fact that we can grow it locally.
The U.S. already does produce some seafood and doesn't eat it. That's because Americans don't always like the fish native to our coasts, so we import from other countries, according to food journalist Paul Greenberg. His book American Catch describes a seafood swap.
We tend to export stronger tasting things like mackerel, black cod, a lot of squid, and then we import sort of neutral tasting things like shrimp, also tilapia, and these are both very, very neutral tasting things that you can kind of deep fry and use in a, sort of the American palate-friendly, sandwich.
He says aquaculture can help correct this imbalance, but
rather than trying to kind of start up, new and complicated ventures, it'd be, first off, let's try and eat the fish that we've already got.
But aquaculture solves more global problems than Americans not liking fishy fish, according to Don Kent with Hub SeaWorld.
There's 7 billion people on Earth now, and there's going to be 9 billion people in your lifetime, very, very soon. How are we going to feed those extra 2 billion people?
Kent says one way to do that is through aquaculture. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. Tomorrow, we'll hear from environmentalists about the impact on wildlife in San Diego Bay. Peggy Pico continues our conversation about fish from the consumer side with a look at the health benefits of eating seafood and how to choose the seafood you eat in a sustainable way.
The latest American dietary guidelines recommend 2 servings of seafood each week for adults. But USDA researchers say up to 90% of American adults don't eat the recommended amount. Here with some insights into the health benefits of eating seafood and how to choose what seafood you eat sustainably are my guests, Katie Ferraro, dietitian and nutrition professor at San Diego State University and Miramar College, and Teresa Talley, coastal specialist for California Sea Grant at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And Katie, what are the health benefits of eating fish on a regular basis?
Well, we recommend eating fish because it's a great way to get protein without the saturated fat that you sometimes find in the higher fat cuts of beef and chicken. On top of that, you get the really valuable omega-3 fatty acids that, to be honest, you just can't get anywhere else in your diet.
Are there some fish that are more beneficial than others?
Well, all fish can certainly fit into a diet, and we recommend, as with all things, you try a variety of different ones so that you get some of the different nutrient benefits. So I wouldn't say that there's any one that really outshines the other, except some of the fattier fish like salmon and tuna. Those will have higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, which are important for example, lowering heart disease risk and helping with brain development in pregnant women, for their fetuses, and even for little children.
So how often should you eat seafood, and who should restrict their intake?
So the last dietary guideline said try to aim to eating for fish like 2 to 3 times a week, but as you said, most Americans don't do that. The benefits of eating fish far outweigh any of the potential hazards of mercury or any toxicity. So you're better served to eat more fish, with the exception of pregnant women. Pregnant women should have no more than 12 ounces. So the new guideline is between 8 and 12 ounces a week. But most pregnant women also weren't eating enough fish. So a couple times a week, try not to go over 12 ounces. That's about 3/4 pound a week.
In that specific population. Now, Teresa, you did some research on the viability of Tuna Harbor Dockside Fish Market in San Diego. Right. What did you find out about the kinds of seafood that San Diegans are eating?
San Diegans tended to mirror what we find for the rest of the country. We have very narrow preferences, mostly tuna, salmon, and shrimp. And so the people in San Diego mirrored that, and what happened was it kind of mismatched with the sorts of things that San Diego fishermen and aqua farmers raise, which are a lot of the smaller fish, coastal fish, and invertebrates.
Now, we hear a lot about choosing seafood in a sustainable way. Mm-hmm. What is the environmental risk if we continue to eat these popular fish, salmon, tuna, and we just eat those over and over again?
So anytime, I think a push for a more diverse diet, so maybe lesser amounts of more types of seafood or more species is the way to go from a health perspective and also from an environmental perspective.
And the environmental issue of, let's say, is there a problem with eating just salmon or just tuna? How does that impact the environment?
I think eating too much of, not too much, but a lot of any one species increases the fishing pressure, increases the chance that you may get into overfishing or whatever environmental impacts are associated with the farming or catch of that species would be accentuated. So diversifying a diet is
helpful to the environment as well. Yeah. Now, Katie, remind us of some of the differences between farmed and wild fish.
As a dietitian, from a nutritional standpoint, there's actually not a huge variety of difference. There's certainly environmental differences, and at the end of the day, we want to encourage people to eat more seafood in general, and of course, I think opportunities that we have here in San Diego to interface with local farmers, local fishermen, etc., gives us that opportunity to select more wild if possible. But at the end of the day, more fish regardless of where you get it from a nutritional standpoint, is a better option. From environmental, that's a different
issue. Teresa, it brings me back to this. The Tuna Harbor Dockside Market opened over a year ago, and one of its goals was to get people to eat more locally caught seafood. Do you think it's working?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a follow-up study, but there's a lot of evidence. If you go to the market on a Saturday morning, it's just vibrant. People are there buying fresh fish and talking to fishermen and their families about how to prepare the food and where they caught it, and just hearing their fish stories. And then that market, the Tuna Harbor Market, served as a model for the Pacific to Plate bill that is being put through by Speaker Atkins' office that'll make it a little bit easier from a regulation perspective to start these sorts of fishermen's markets.
Right, and that market's open Saturday morning?
It's Saturday morning from 8 in the morning to 1. And it's on Harbor Drive right near Seaport Village.
All right, so eat more fish locally. All right, Katie Ferraro, Teresa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sea otters and whales are just some of the stars featured this week in Big Blue Live. Here's a live look at the kelp forest at Monterey Bay. Leopard sharks, seahorses, and sea dragons are just a few of the 3,000 animals you can see at the Birch Aquarium in La Jolla. This area is a hot spot for sharks?
And rays. It's a hot spot for sharks and rays. So it's not just the leopard sharks we see in La Jolla, it's all different species of sharks and rays. And we don't exactly know why they're all attracted to this site, but that's part of the ongoing research here.
Birch Aquarium is the public outreach center for UC San Diego researchers.
My name is Andy Nosal, and I'm a marine biologist at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and my lab is basically right behind me.
Perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the aquarium puts on a shark-themed exhibit for visitors every summer. The big question this year, where do these harmless leopard sharks go in the winter?
We've tagged about 30 sharks in La Jolla with these pop-up satellite transmitters that have been programmed to detach from the shark during the winter, this coming winter, float to the surface, and wherever they are, they'll transmit to a satellite their position, and then I'll get an email finally telling us where these sharks go in the winter.
From sharks to one of the sea's most captivating creatures, Birch is one of a few aquariums attempting to breed sea dragons in captivity. This cousin of the seahorse is actually a fish found only off the coast of Australia. Leslie Matsushige has been with the aquarium for 22 years.
We've raised up to 13 species of seahorses here, and have sent over 2,000 seahorses out to other aquariums around the country and the world. And so that's what we hope to achieve with this sea dragon propagation program.
They may resemble a dragon, but only grow to about 19 inches long. You may have heard about that hammerhead shark in La Jolla last weekend. It forced a temporary closure of the beach, but researchers don't think anything would have happened. They say the shark was drawn by blood from a kayaker gutting fish nearby.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we look at medical legal partnerships when lawyers work hand in hand with doctors to help disadvantaged patients. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
Visitors headed to the Grand Canyon can expect two things: breathtaking views like this and long waits. Tourists are showing up in big numbers at Grand Canyon and other national parks like Zion, Yellowstone, and Yosemite, driven by good weather, cheap gas, and marketing campaigns ahead of next year's National Park Service Centennial. With a busy Labor Day weekend still ahead, 5 million more visitors have been to the parks compared to this time last year. Growing in both size and personality, Devi, the 5-month-old baby hippo at the San Diego Zoo, was let out into the hippo pool yesterday morning, jumping and rolling around in the water here with her mom. Zookeepers say she will nurse with her mom for about a year. The playful swimmer is experimenting with solid food and can be found in the pool 4 times a week. Back to mild, dry weather around here in San Diego, at least for the next few days. We're looking at 70s by the beaches after the morning overcast clears. A mix of sun and clouds expected in the inland valleys with temperatures in the upper 70s and low 80s. Clear for the mountain areas, mostly in the 70s, and hotter in the desert with triple-digit temperatures. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. We'll be back our normal time tomorrow at 5. Thank you for joining us. You have a great night.